portion of the program now where we're going to bring the Maafa Celebration Committee up, please. If everyone would please come forward from the Maafa Celebration Committee. And we're going to honor the 10 warriors that have been selected for 2010. Each of the committee members has a short bio, a very short biographical sketch, if you will, on each of the 10 warriors. And we know in some cases we have a family representative here for that particular warrior. And so after the committee member makes their brief remarks, if there is one family representative for that warrior who would like to come forward and take 60, 90 seconds tops to make remarks, we would welcome that. As you can see on the program, we are scheduled to try to do this from 4 to 6 p.m., so that's why we've purposely kept our comments short, but we would welcome one representative from a warrior's family to come forward and make brief remarks. Before we start, we're going to ask Jed Sneed, the facilitator of the Maafa Celebration Committee. We're going to ask him to come forward and just go right down the line and introduce the committee members.
Again, how's everybody doing? No, wait a minute. How's everybody doing? We are here. We are here. We are blessed. We are blessed to be here. Again, I facilitate with the help of everybody else. We all facilitate, don't we, Diane? We do. To my far left, Sister Diane Sheffield. Y'all hold y'all's applause to the end, okay? Sister Diane Sheffield. Brother Aaron Thompson sitting in for his father, Jim Thompson. My sister Kathy Cobbett. Behind me, your facilitator and mistress of ceremonies today, Shirley Thompson. Sister Sonia Sizer, the president of Rochester Above. Curtis Rivers, the owner, with his wife of Mood Makers Boats. And Stephanie Sneed, my wife. Give us a round of applause, please. And thank you all for coming out and supporting us. Again, as Shirley said, though, this is one of the most important parts of the program to us because we get a chance to remember the contributions of those just like you and I who decided to make a difference when they were on this earth. And we call them warriors because they made a difference while they were on this earth. Ashe.
Good evening, everyone. I will be reading the bio of LaPloy Ashford. LaPloy, also known as Lakey Ashford, was born in McCool, Mississippi in 1934. After graduating from the University of Albany in 1960, he adopted Rochester, New York as his home. LaPloy, an activist in the civil rights struggle, organized a demonstration in Rochester in 1961 to protest police brutality. Devoted to improving civil rights and education, he became Deputy Commissioner of Public Safety, the highest post held by an African American in Rochester at that time. The Rochester Urban League chose Ashford from 27 candidates as the best possible person to direct their program in 1967. Under Ashford's 2-year leadership, the Rochester League grew from a staff of 8 persons to 112. During his time with the Rochester League, he improved Project Uplift, established housing service known as Operation Equality, and launched the Advancement Through Clerical Training or ACT program to ensure the advancement of workers in the field. In 1967, LaPloy was appointed to fill a vacancy on the Rochester School Board. He served as board president in 1968 through 69 and became the first African-American person to be elected citywide. In 1970, he left Rochester to become executive director of the Urban League in Chicago. LaPloy Lakey Ashford died in December of 2004. Is there anyone at this time who would like to come up and make some comments regarding Lakey Ashford?
Lakey Ashford was a prince who came out of Mississippi, who during the Civil Rights Revolution took a temporary position with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and as he toured the South trying to organize youth groups, he was thrown into a Mississippi jail. They beat up on him so that his digestive system was never right, but he didn't flinch until the day he passed on. Some people didn't like some of his behavior, but Lakey was all right with me. He was an honor student in the city school district. He taught at Franklin High School, and he was a graduate of the University of Rochester, and we ought to take some notes from Lakey Ashford. Thank you.
That Sankofa brings down the house, or at least the microphone. I'm going to read a short biographical piece on Anna Bird. Following me, the next biographical piece you hear will be about William Hall. Anna Lee Bird. Although Mrs. Bird passed in January of this year, her impact on the lives of thousands of Rochesterians will be felt for generations. But first, a little about her early years. Her childhood friend, Connie Mitchell, recalled that Anna Lee was a serious teenager, but not so serious that she and her underage friends didn't pile on the makeup in order to sneak away from their homes in New Rochelle to go down to New York City to the Savoy Club and dance and dance and dance the night away. She was serious but fun-loving, and she was a loyal friend, Connie Mitchell said. After meeting and marrying Jimmy Bird in Rochester and giving birth to James and Sharon, Mrs. Bird brought some of that seriousness and dedication to her work at the Urban League. You heard mention earlier of the ACT program, the Advancement Through Clerical Training. Well, as director of ACT for about 30 years, Mrs. Bird was responsible for helping more than 3,000 Rochesterians find good employment with giants like Kodak and Xerox. She felt that the graduates of the program were a reflection on her personally and the Urban League, so she made sure they were well equipped when they left her program. She was the second employee of the Urban League and showed Bill Johnson the ropes when he was hired as executive director in 1972. He recently told me that he told her that she should have been heading the organization because she knew so much about it. There were two outstanding qualities Mr. Johnson admired most about Mrs. Bird. One was her humility. Despite the time and the passion she invested in the ACT program and considering what it did for thousands of people and this community, and despite everything she did at her church, Mount Olivet, Mrs. Bird never, ever talked about herself. Bill Johnson said that young people have no idea who she was. The second quality was her focus on solving problems. She didn't have time to talk about people. She had nothing mean to say about anybody. She was about positive thinking and getting the job done. Mrs. Bird was involved, right up to her death, with building a stronger Rochester. She oversaw the Urban League membership campaign at Mount Olivet, and on that Sunday, she told her pastor where he needed to sign on the paper, and then she died on Tuesday. Anna Lee Bird, Beloved warrior, we thank you for your many contributions to the fabric of our community and for the wonderful example you set by the way you lived your life. Is there a representative from Mrs. Bird's family coming forward? And then the next biographical remarks you hear will be on William Hall.
My name is Janine Colvin, and this is my daughter, Jalisha Bird. We'd like to accept this award in the memory of Mrs. Bird and her grandmother and the Bird family.
She's not ready to say.
I know that she was very dedicated to her family.
Jalisha.
My grandma did a lot of stuff for me and my daughter. You can't just say one thing.
There's not just one thing she can say about her grandmother. She said her grandmom did a lot of stuff, and she can't just be put on the spot and pick out the one thing that she remembers most about her grandmom. Jalisha, thank you for that much.
Good afternoon. I'm going to read about William Hall. And this is coming from an article from the Democrat Chronicle, February 22nd, 1986. It was founded in Rochester Black History, 1795 through 1990, by a Joe Sanders publisher. William Hall was the first African-American executive director of Baden Street Settlement. He was hired as the executive director in 1969. Baden Street Settlement oversees community services programs such as daycare, youth, drug counseling, financial aid, and neighborhood development. Born in a small farming town of Oviedo, Florida, Mr. Hall had to travel to Orlando to get an education. He moved to Rochester, New York in 1953 after serving in the U.S. Army in Korea. He found work as a janitor, a construction worker, and as a laborer. But in 1959, he decided to further his education and pursue a degree in business administration at RIT. After graduating, Mr. Hall worked for firms such as IBM, but in 1965, he was hired by the Urban League of Rochester to run a jobs program. Mr. Hall stated in an article in Democrat Chronicle in 1986, "I have involved in the community activism work since 1955 on a volunteer basis. And when the opportunity came to get a paying job in the field that he took, he took it." In that same article, Mr. Hall stated that he believed Rochester had changed drastically and progressively since he had arrived in the 50s, and that there were greater opportunities for African Americans to succeed. William Hall made transition on March 12, 2006, but not before making a positive and lasting contribution to his adopted home of Rochester, New York. And as we remember him this day as a warrior in our community and for our community too. Is there a family member here representing William Hall? Okay, the next bio will be Claire Bear Brooks Crittenden. Come on.
Okay, all right now.
Miss Stubbs, please don't come up here.
Good evening. I just could not let the moment go by without anyone saying anything for all the great work that Bill Hall did at Baden Street. I knew him personally, and he was a great man. I was never on the board, but I was always involved at Baden Street. And I remember he used to take us, there would be about 75 of us going to the Settlement House Convention. And and it was always at a different place, and you learned so much of what you were to do in the neighborhood. And that's what Baden Street Settlement was, a neighborhood place to rescue those. And they have a motto or something, I can't remember the exact words, but it meant you were out there, you were lost, but if you came back over to Baden Street, you could be found, helped, clothes, fed, and everything. Baden Street is even today a landmark in Rochester. And you young folks who don't know, or maybe haven't even heard of Bill Hall, he did great things at Baden Street and the Rochester community.
Thank you. This was great, Miss Stubbs. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Clara Bell Brooks Crittenden. This lady did so much in the community that I'm going to do a short bio, and you will be able to go on the website and get the full information about this phenomenal woman. From her youth, Clara Bell Brooks Crittenden had a special connection with people. She was affectionately known as Mrs. C, who had deep love for Jesus Christ, her family, and people in the community. Mrs. C was employed 28 years by Action for a Better Community. She was a community activist and feverishly worked to change how inner city schools educate children. She was the co-founder and co-chairperson of the support group Family and Friends of Parents of Murdered Children and Victims of Domestic Violence. On her 75th birthday, the city of Rochester proclaimed December 20th, 2007, Clara Bell Crittenden Day. She left this earth December 16, 2009. And to reiterate her famous saying, and that's that. Is there any family members out here representing? Do we have a family member? Yes, all right. Yes, Ashe.
On behalf of the Crittenden family, I'd like to accept this honor on their behalf. There's a family reunion going on this weekend, and I'm Sharon Hancock, and I am a daughter-in-law. But I'm not really a daughter-in-law, I am the daughter-in-law. She showed much love for me and all her children. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I will be reading a short bio about Eugene H. Scott. Eugene H. Scott, whose parents had been enslaved in Louisiana, was born in Rochester, New York on May 5, 1929. His family was one of the founding families of the Mount Olivet Baptist Church. As a young man, he served in the U.S. Army during the Korean War and was one of the first African Americans to serve as an MP when the Army was integrated during the Truman administration. He worked as an electrician at Flantiers before joining the Rochester Police Department. He was the third African American to be appointed. During his time with the police force, he trained many new officers, including Robert Duffy. On the job and at home, he brought a steadiness that you felt you could depend on, as well as his great sense of humor. He treated everyone with respect and worked with Mildred Johnson as an advocate for youth offenders who came from difficult family circumstances. He was instrumental in establishing the Black Officers Union. He served this community honorably for 30 years. Gene had a way about him that made you feel you were important in his life, that you were his best friend, his favorite niece. He died on January 17, 2000, and the fact that among the people present at his funeral were people who at one time he had arrested speaks to the kind of man he was. Is there a...
The other thing that would speak of Gene's life, when we got married, it was illegal to get married in 38 states, and didn't bother him at all. The other thing is that he definitely would be honored by this, but completely embarrassed.
That was Gene's widow, Jenny. Thank you.
Greetings, sisters and brothers. I will be doing a short bio of the Honorable Ethel Dix. This reading is excerpted from the Democratic Chronicle article by Maafa titled A Life Well Lived. It was published November 15, 2009. Pain and sorrow coursed through Ethel Dix's life like a river swollen with spring runoff. But the hurt did not break her or define her, says her husband, Mason Dix. She was happy, joyous, active, and always ready to celebrate, always cooking for a crowd at holidays and opening the doors to their Rochester home. Born in Jacksonville, Florida, she was raised in Adel, Georgia. She moved to Rochester in 1985 and died in October 2009 at the age of 56 of medical complications. She ran a family daycare, but her love of children did not end when the last one went home for the evening. Dr. Anderson, also known as the Honorable Sankofa, shared a telling story. A couple of summers ago, a group gathered on the grounds of the James and Bessie Ham house on Adams Street. There were only 5 or 6 of us, he recalled. And Ethel said, "This is not right." She got into her car and drove off. She came back with 2 children and a college student and said, "These children need to know their history, and so do we." That's the kind of woman she was. She and Mason found the Adams Street Block Club, and she had just became president of the association. Before her death, says Gladys Roster, Mrs. Dix's longtime friend. Everyone was family to her, Miss Roster said. She recognized right for what it was and wrong for what it was, said Demond Meeks, coordinator for the Alliance of Quality Education, where Mrs. Dix volunteered. She had no problem calling the mayor's office or anyone else's office to raise her concerns. She put me in the mindset of a woman called Moses, he said, like Harriet Tubman. She seemed to say, "We've come this far, and we are not turning back now." Ellis Lopez, the director of the Family and Victim Services Unit, said she had the ability to talk to people in pain. She had the ability to identify with the victims, but there was always a sense of hope about her. He believes that Ethel Dix's hope and determination to work through hardship or were real indicators of her character. You can be wounded and use that experience for good. That's what she said, and that's what she did. In a speaking out essay published in the Democratic Chronicle, Mrs. Dix wrote, quote, "I have resolved to save the lives of my grandchildren and all of the children in this community. We have chosen to be survivors, not victims," unquote. And that's why we recognize Mrs. Ethel Dix as a warrior today. A member from the Dix family, please.
Yeah, my name is Mason Dix. Ethel was my wife. I'd just like to thank the committee and thank everybody for being there. She was a great woman. She did a lot of good things in Adams Street and in the community. And just like they spoke about Miss Betsy Ham, she reminded me of a sweet woman like Miss Betsy Ham. I just want to thank everybody.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to read a short bio of Dr. Freddie Thomas. Brother Freddie Thomas. Brother Freddie Thomas was a selfless gem to the Rochester community. Continually giving of himself, still, he drank every drop of life. He excelled in the fields of biology and chemistry, African history, and Eastern religions, and he was a visiting professor at Howard University. But further, he was an accomplished pianist and composer, copywriting several musical pieces. Brother Freddie was a dedicated lay social worker, a charismatic Pied Piper. He was able to lead troubled youths from lives of crime to lives of education and community building. Throughout all this, he was a devoted family man, a characteristic often lost by those seeking to excel in other fields. Brother Freddie was born in Norfolk, Virginia. He received a bachelor degree from Wagner College in New York and an honorary doctorate of humanities from the School of Common Sense in Brooklyn in 1972. Arriving in Rochester in 1952, Brother Freddie worked for years at Kodak's Research and Development Department at the U of R School of Medicine and Dentistry's Department of Radiation Biology and Biophysics. An early advocate of self-reliance through urban agriculture, Brother Freddie taught young folks to use their backyards to grow vegetables. Brother Freddie spent much free time at his home tutoring troubled, urban, black youth, many of whom were from gangs, and their appreciation was demonstrated in 1965 when the young people he had been tutoring pooled their resources to enable his attendance at a World Surgical Conference in France. Brother Freddie treated his wife and life partner Midge with queen-like respect and love. Even in the middle of various crises, such as his hospitalization, he commemorated their anniversary monthly with a gift, every single month. Brother Freddie is kind of a legend now, but he was no magician. And no doubt he would want all of us, like himself, to wake up, get educated, use our potential, and give back. Thank you. Are there any family or friends among us who wish to speak in memory of Dr. Thomas?
In case you don't know, I'm the widow of Dr. Freddie Thomas. I don't know why all these people are here, but anyways, Freddie Thomas is living today. Through all of his accolades publicly, I can truly say he was a warrior and he was an excellent husband to me. I was his queen, and I'd like for Sylvia, who knew Freddie, in fact, Freddie dated Sylvia and her husband and me, our first date. Sylvia, and Glenn Edwards is here. Sylvia Barber.
It was through Freddie that I became a storyteller. I followed his example, and he taught the adult friends that he had so many things that we needed to know about that I could go on and talk for an hour. And so I'm going to shut up and just say because of him, many of us excelled in life and did great things.
Hello, how you doing? I'm Glenn Edwards. I'm one of the youths that Freddie Thomas helped. He helped me to go to college at Oberlin College in Ohio. He came there and gave a speech in my behalf to get me there and to keep me there. He also, I used to go to Lopez. I don't know if anybody remember Lopez. I used to go there and eat some chicken, and Freddie would be sitting there and just drinking coffee. And then he would drop some knowledge on me, and then I would take that knowledge and try to drop it at school and get in trouble. Especially when we talked about whether God was white or black or green or yellow. And then I would ask my mama, say, what do you think of that? And she said, well, Dr. Freddie Thomas told you, must be right. And then I used to walk, we used to walk from Jefferson Avenue to her house. And when we get to her house, she would come out and greet us, Mrs. Thomas. And Freddie would show us all these books and really got me into research and understanding and a whole lot of things. So I thank him for what I am today. I have 2 kids, I'm married, I have a master's degree in social work, I work as a retired teacher. So all thanks to Freddie.
That's a good 90 seconds. Thank you.
I gotta add one more thing. Because of Freddie, I started collecting Black history, and I've collected over 2,000 books, those of which are in the Frederick Douglass Community Center. Yeah.
Mrs. Jessie James. Mrs. Jessie James was born in 1932 and was a native of Sanford, Florida. She moved to Rochester in 1952. On the back cover of her first book, A Journey of Self-Discovery, it is written, "There's a word to describe Miss Jessie James, self-started. She is highly motivated, talented, and she is not afraid to challenge herself and ask, why not?" The cover goes on to inform the reader that it took Miss James 10 years of part-time study while raising her family to earn her master's degree, and then she went right on and earned her bachelor's degree, and went right on and earned her master's degree. Mrs. James was an author, lecturer, trainer, organizer, and educator. My wife and I first met her at the University that was held classes in the 1980s at Wilson High School. She prided herself in facilitating group processes and helping individuals build effective life skills. Mrs. James worked at Rochester Institute of Technology as a program administrator and faculty member in the College of Continuing Education. Her responsibilities included program training, seminars and conferences, hiring instructors, marketing, and counseling. But in addition to all of her educational and social accomplishments, Mrs. James is being remembered and recognized as a warrior today because she believed in and acted in the best interest of her community. She was a true life model. Her faith in God and her community were unswerving. In the introduction to her book, A Journey of Self-Discovery, she wrote, "I found that honest sharing is the key to healing. Thank you, Miss James, for your guidance, insight, and example." Miss James died on August 4th, 2005. Is there any family members, family or friends of Mrs. James? If not, I will speak. As I said, my wife, Steph, and I first met her. She was teaching classes at the University at Wilson High School. And from the time we met her in the 80s to her passing, she was a friend of ours and, as I said, a true warrior. Ashe.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm going to read a bio on Dr. Kenneth Woodworth. Dr. Kenneth Woodworth was born in Columbus, Ohio in 1928 and moved to Rochester, New York in 1960. Dr. Woodward died of cancer April 4th, 1996 at the Genesee Hospital. His long professional career saw him associated with the University of Rochester's School of Medicine as an associate dean for minority affairs, and also as a professor of pediatrics at Strong Memorial. He was the executive director of Rochester Health Network from 1972 to 1981. He played a major role in the building of Anthony Jordan Health Center, the Northeast Health Center, the Genesee Health Center, and Westside Health Center also. Regarding the Jordan Health Center, Dr. Woodward was quoted as saying, "We wanted to destroy the myth of how people feel about health. There was a feeling that people of color were not interested in health, that they wouldn't show the same level of cooperation in health as other people. Through the Health Maintenance Network, we were able to give the same level of care to everyone without making artificial distinctions." Dr. Woodward was appointed by President Richard Nixon to the Health Industry Committee of the Cost of Living Council in 1972. The year before that, the Monroe County Medical Association presented Dr. Woodward with the Edward Mott Moore Award for dedicating himself to the community. Dr. Walter Cooper, a friend of Dr. Woodward for 48 years, was quoted in the DNC as saying, "I think he was proudest that he did not allow the circumstances of race to play limits in him. He was able to see people for what they are, for their humanity, and treat them with dignity and respect." We remember Dr. Kenneth W. Woodward this day as a servant and a warrior. Is there anyone here to speak for him?
Dr. Woodward touched the lives of just about everyone that we have saluted this afternoon, and many, many others. Yes, ma'am. I'm here too. With you. I remember when she was a child up under me, you know. And Dr. Woodward was practicing privately, but he was also spending a whole lot of time over in what was called the Hanover houses, because in the basement of one of those, was it 3 buildings, is where he opened a clinic, the first kind of really personal service for a lot of people in Rochester, especially on the east side of town. And he was a forerunner and an advocate that led to the federal government listening to finally put some funds into funding local health organizations. And in fact, not only was he the head of several of these organizations that was mentioned in the bio, he was delivering the service to model what it could be. And by the way, where's Ruth? Is it true, Ruth, that your second-born son is named Kenneth or Ken Wood after Kenneth Woodward? If so, I guess I claim it. Thank you.
Good evening again. It is hot out here, and I am going to be brief. But because I'm brief does not take away the many works that this next person, Felissa McEwen, has done in this community. She was a daughter, sister, mother of two beautiful children named Maya and Malik, whom she loved deeply. Her children were her inspiration in all that she did. Felissa was an actress, businesswoman, writer, publisher, singer, and the host of RC TV. Education was very, very important to Felissa. She went back to school, and she was summa cum laude at Brockport Graduate and a member of 2 National Honor Societies after staying home, being a stay-at-home mom. Now that's an accomplishment. Her deep passion to better the lives of other children and her children and the youth in the Rochester community was evident in her work at REOC and everything that she did. She also had a theater group called Sounds of Spirit Repertory. And through that group, she taught so many things through theater. Through her education, the education that she did through REOC, the arts, the lives of the children and the children and youth that she touched, she made a difference. Felissa McEwen left us at the young age of 47, the day Michael Jackson died. She died at 2 a.m. Farrah Fawcett died at 11, and we know when Michael Jackson died. But you know what? She made a lot of difference. She's gone too soon, but she will not be forgotten. Can I have a family member that's here?
My name is Paulette McEwen, and I'm going to represent the McEwen family. Felissa was my cousin. Didn't have very many relatives here. They all originated from Mississippi and the Chicago area. So we were very close as children. And, again, as Diane said, she, left us very early. And with the determination that she had, she even tried out to be a Charlie's Angel at one time. And, she, and the things that she had done, I mean, she wrote poems, published a book, just did a lot of things. And she was pretty, she had a whole lot of integrity about it and determination. And the McEwen family is pretty rebellious and had this determination going on, so I believe that she would have gone far, had she been able to live a little longer. But the things that she accomplished, were very good. And her children, they're not here today, but one of them is a singer and does play some instruments and things, and maybe she'll do, go a little further than what her mom did. But we thank you for honoring.
Thank you so much, Paulette. There we have it. The 10 Warriors for 2010. Thank you very much, Maafa, for celebration.
I have the privilege to introduce this beautiful, beautiful sister, Erika D. Haygood. She's a poet, a writer, publisher, performer, and motivational speaker who has her BA from New York University and her MA from Colgate Rochester Divinity. She is currently a doctoral candidate in American Studies at the University of Buffalo, and she has been serving as a minister since 2004. Erika Haygood is also an assistant professor of history and religion at Hilbert College in Hamburg, New York. When I first heard Erika speak last year, I was mesmerized by her speech and its content. And in observing the audience, I saw how her speech had captivated them. I knew then, I knew that I wanted to invite her to be our keynote speaker because she is a powerful sister. And you know what? The Maafa committee is so happy that she accepted. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Erika D. Haygood.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm just going to be before you for a few minutes, so as we say in church, you might as well get with me. Okay? I'm so glad to be here today. I really count it a blessing. I want to start off with a few words of the poem where Langston Hughes says, I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers, and my soul has grown deep like the rivers. I think those words are fitting not only because they are the theme for this event, but because we've come today to pay homage to those who cross waters, not unlike these waters here, stretched before us. To be here, many of which would pass along on the Middle Passage. And so I think it's fitting for us to pause here and to think collectively about those words. I think it's just as fitting to talk about rivers, given the fact that we come from a tradition, a long history of people who saw the rise of pyramids, who watched civilizations both rise and fall long before the Western world, who were the witness of many new dawns being ushered in, and even saw the sweet conclusion of many sunsets right along the river's front, along the Nile and along the Euphrates. And so when we talk about knowing rivers, we talk about a people who have soaked in the rivers that they lived along for so many years that it's fitting that we should pause here talking about rivers today. But we have to also be very honest about the experience of African Americans along those rivers. For it is as Sam Cooke once sung when he said, we were born by the river. It's no wonder that our souls, as Langston Hughes says, has grown deep just like those rivers. But we also must move to that ominous moment where the rivers began to run down into the Atlantic Ocean until it reached that place just along the Gold and the Ivory Coast, and many of our ancestors became a part of the slave trade and would arrive here or not make the journey along the slave ship coming here to the New World. And so when we talk about how the river has continued to run, and we talk about knowing rivers, the song goes a little further, if you remember, and it says, just like that river, we've been running ever since. It seems like just like that river, our history has been going on as we've run along the backs of the very rivers that have brought us here. But also in this very tangential sense, we can think about this hallowed day, this celebration that we are here for, as very well placed, being that we've come here on the 3rd and tomorrow we celebrate the nation's independence. But if we went back to about 1852, and I think this is a good place to think about history since we're talking about what is going on before us. If we went back to that moment where even in this city on that day, Frederick Douglass would give the prolific speech where he talked about what to the Negro does July 4th mean. And he gave us not only a bird's eye view of what the celebration was about, but he also said that in celebrating and in remembering the testimonies of our ancestors, we must also think about those in our midst, in our communities, and in our nations who are yet fighting for liberation. And so when we stand here today, we have come today not only to honor those that have gone before us, but there is a specific challenge that must go out as we are gathering here today.
Yes.
And so as I stand here, I have reverberating in my mind the words of Langston Hughes, the words of Sam Cooke. I even hear Frederick Douglass' words bellowing out to us on the rivers of our souls and saying to us today that this must be more than a symbolic gathering. This has to be more than the symbolic gestures of casting flowers onto water. But we must also have the very real command, the call to action where we do something once we leave this place. And so if I said anything to you today, it would simply be to challenge you to do just that. To think of these moments not simply as the living into some formality, going through some tradition that you've gone through year after year, but to think of this moment as your obligation, an affirmation of your responsibility to your family and your community, to have that call of action that forces us to do more than continue with formality, but to change the world that is around us. That's how we live into the legacy of our ancestors. But now I have to be honest with you and say that when you begin to remember history, and when you began to share the stories of your ancestors, when you began to talk about the sacrifices that they gave for us, and you began to say that I will now use these sacrifices to create a better present reality than what we have known up until this moment. There are many that will scoff at your remembering of history. You have to understand that there are several others that are not here that don't even understand this kind of gathering. There are some who may wonder, why would you come to remember history? Why would you stand at the gates or the grave sites of history? Why would you come to the place of pain, to the very rivers that have spoken death for your generations and for your ancestors before you? Why would you come to this place? I tell you, in thinking of such questions for those that are not here, if anyone asks you why you came here today, you tell them that I told you this story about this man from Galilee. And I am very much moved by the end of Jesus' life when he is coming to the very end and he's going into the city and his disciples say to him, don't go because you know you will die. And so I asked him the question that some who are not here may ask, why would you go to the place where you die? Why would you go to a place called Golgotha, which simply means skulls or the place of death? Why would you go to the place of pain? I tell you that I have searched the text for so many hours. I've interrogated the Gospels nearly until I am blind. I've thought about it and questioned my Savior so much that I've risked irreverence trying to figure out that question. And the answer came not in the text, but quite interestingly, it came from these rivers. They say that there's this fish, you probably heard of him, he's a salmon. And they say the salmon lives about 4 to 7 years. And as the salmon somehow nears the end of his life, he often will go back to the stream of his origin to reproduce. And that's quite interesting because the salmon suffers from a condition called similarity, which simply means that after you reproduce, you die. And so the salmon goes to the very place that it knows will cause it death. And so we have 3 characters here today. We have you, we have the Savior, and we have the salmon. And we are forced to answer the same question. Why do you go to the place that will cause you death? I understand in looking at the life of my Savior, the same thing that I understand in looking at the life of a salmon. The salmon understands that it is in the place of death that rebirth begins. It is at the hour of our demise. It is at the moment that we begin to honor the death of our ancestors that we are reborn anew. And so we enter into the same place that Jesus of Nazareth understood that sometimes it takes dying to live again. And here we have come to this hour where we are at the place of our ancestors, saying something about the death of those that have gone on from here. But I promise you that if we do as the salmon does and remember the place of death, if we do as Jesus did and go to the very place that is called death, I promise you it'll give you new life. I promise you if you remember the ancestors, it'll transform your community. I promise you if you remember those that have gone before, you'll have a word to speak to those in your life and to your family. I promise you that if you remember this hallowed moment, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a call to action, it will so transform your life that you will live finally into the words of Langston Hughes, that your souls will finally grow as deep as the rivers. You be blessed. Thank you.
Libation is an ancient custom, probably coming out of many lands in the Eastern Hemisphere, but certainly was and is still practiced in Africa. It is where an elder is called upon to help the community to venerate those who have passed off. The caveat being, it is the people who once in this life who took steps, who performed deeds that represent community, uplifting humanity. And it is those kinds of people that we have tried to enumerate during the salute to the warriors these several years. There will come a point when I'm reciting the libation statement, or the Tamsi La Tambico as it is called, that I will ask for names to be placed into our circle. Feel free to place the name of a person that you knew when that person was in this life, in this world, but who has since removed to another realm. And certainly we want the name of those 10 warriors who have saluted today. Is that all right? Yes, sir. Now, since we're talking about members of the human family who were kidnapped from their homes in Africa and pressed into the slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade. And whereas a number of them did make landfall in South, Central, and North America, there were many more that were lost in passage. Many more decided that they would not live. And the ceremony therefore begins with commemorating that loss. But the ceremony goes on to try to compel, as our keynote speaker today, Sister Erika Haygood, emphasized what we do about the legacy that is handed to us. If we go on off and get tuned into all the networks that come across the airwaves electronically, if that is what we're about, we are indeed lost. And we are calling the death knell of humanity. But if we will remember our ancestors, even those who we didn't know personally, but whose stories have been passed on to a generation of generation, we have stepped back into the realm of what we need to do. It is important that we take note of what earlier generations have done, which is to come here, daughter, son, I'm fixing to cut this corn off my toe. And there's some wisdom that's come with me growing this corn. So I want you to pay attention. Whatever device they would use to call attention, to get you to hear the story. My God, there are many more of us today than there was when I was born. And if half of us would tell them stories. I don't mean, there are tall tales, that's all right for amusement, for entertainment, but there are life lessons. You got to pass that on. Is that all right? Can we do that? All right. It's got to come with mama's milk. It's got to come with daddy, making sure that mama is comfortable enough to give nourishment to that child. And we got to continue through kindergarten. Oh yes, Mama. May Alice was her name when she was in the country. When she got to the city, they called her Mary Alice. But Mama who got her 8th grade diploma when I was about 55 years of age. Mama, when I was a little boy, she knew Miss Bond in kindergarten. She knew Miss Blackensee in the 1st grade. She knew Miss Ankenbrock in 2nd grade. She knew Miss Carson. I don't know how Miss Carson got into all of our oxen, but she knew them. She knew Mrs. Harms. Went to Mrs. Harms' house to see about her baby boy. I ain't no baby, Mom. She's my baby. And Daddy said that was all right. And it kind of worked, you know. I think now I've about put most of my sinning behind me because I had some foundations laid.
And that's all we're asking each other to do. Lay the foundation for the kin who are in our house. And if our house is right, and the house over here is right, that's two right. That's why we have a community. Is that all right, brother? All right. Here we go now. What I want in this vessel are samplings of earth from Alabama, Limestone County, from Sullivan's Island, back to this island, from Goree Island, off the coast of, what's the name of that country over there? Senegal. Yeah. And from Cape Coast and Elmina down at that other little place they call Ghana, that's the one. So all that's up in here. And I'm going to ask you to select some ladies, some wives, to take some of this out of here. Throw it out for the example when I get They came in the name of Jesus and other kings. They came and laid hands on Ashanti, Fanti, and Tweet. They took hold of Bamana, Mosi, and Lobi. Kidnapped EBBO, Bobo, and Igbo. They stole Mandinka, Bambara, and Yoruba. And they drove the captives down to the sea by the 2s and 10s. By the millions, they drove the captives down to the sea. And for days beyond cover, the captives seemed not to know who or who they were. There were some that didn't perish in the sea and who came at length to these shores. And because they decided to live, stories were passed on from generation to generation. And therefore, our fathers and mothers came here, lived, loved, struggled, and built here. At this place, our love and labor rose like the sun and gave strength and meaning to the day. For them then who gave so much, we give in return. On this same soil, we will sow our seed and build and move in unity and strength. Here too, we will continue their struggle for liberation and for a higher level of human life. May our eyes be the eagle, our strength be the elephant, and the boldness of our life be like the lion. May we always remember and honor our ancestors for as long as the sun shines and the waters flow. For all of our people everywhere then, for Samori, Ya Asantiwa, and all those warrior women who dared resist on our continent soil. For Denmark Beasley, Gabrielle, Nat Turner, Frederick, Augustus, Washington, Bailey, Douglas, Martin, Robinson, Delaney, Sojourners, be citizens. They can only be property. And lest I forget, John Anthony Copeland and Shields Green. Yeah, they went on down to Harper's Ferry with that man named Brown. What is his first name there? John Brown. Yeah. And John Brown had it all right for a minute, but they caught up with it. Yes, they did. And he went on down to his death at the end of the hangman's noose. He didn't flinch. He didn't shuffle. Good God Almighty, he left two that was to follow him to that gallows. Actually, it was three. But I'm talking about John Anthony Copeland. He was a scholar, man. He had book learning, brother. But he came on down to Harper's Ferry, Virginia, to try to make some noise so that a nation would come to its senses and get rid of this thing called slavery. And he wrote a beautiful, flowing letter to his surviving family. He said, don't worry about me. He said, I'm all right. I just hope that the God who made us will forgive me my trespasses. But I'm going to a better place. And you all keep on the struggle. That's what he wrote in beautiful flowing praise. Shields Green couldn't write. Could he did? But he sure could act. Shields Green, remembering the family he had come out of, he had left, that had been pulled away from him. Shields Green, who walked the streets of Rochester, who worked with Douglas, but when the time came for action, he went to Harper's Ferry. And so, on behalf of all those warriors, we do now pour for those warriors whom we have saluted this day, and the warriors in your personal recollection need to have their names lifted up. Let us hear those names loud and clear. Come on.
Amelia Parker.
Bernie Adams.
I can't hear you.
Mary Bartholomew.
And for our children, as they walk among us this day, as they look to us for guidance, for protection, look to us that we might bring them a brighter day tomorrow, one more safe, one more supporting of their energy and their intelligence. We therefore close this libation statement. And in this closing, we're asking for a promise, not to me. I got to do what I've been taught to do. A whole lot's been given me, so I think I know a little bit about what to do. But especially we who are raising or influencing children right now, let us, in this closing statement, make the promise to hold on a little tighter, to give the story to them young folks, that they might be able to honor the life given them and the culture which we have brought into this land. And therefore, we will close the ceremony by reciting 7 Harambe, 7. And we will sustain the 7th one. But in that reciting of it, I ask you to make that promise if you would at least lay a hand on somebody next to you, so we're in contact. If you can do 2 hands, that's good. Oh. 7 times now. Harambe simply means let's all pull together. Harambe!
Harambe! Harambe! Harambe! Harambe!